So we can all admit that this has been a crazy year. Crazy, crazy year. We're 9-0, so let's all be thankful for that. Um, but then also, when you think about what's going on this year, um, I think it's been a little bit of a weird year because it seems like every game that we have has like different storylines attached to it that makes you think that we actually could drop this game or drop that game. And it's been like that since the South Florida game, actually. So what I'll do is I'm going to go through all of the games since South Florida. I'm going to talk about some of the storylines that had me a little concerned about potentially losing those games. And then I'm going to talk about if I believe we're going to finish the year undefeated in the regular season and then potentially in the ACC championship as well. So before we do that, my name is Jordan Harris. I'm your favorite host in the entire world, and this is Sports Truth. All right, so first let's talk about the South Florida game. Well, before we do that, just to drive home what I'm talking about, a lot of times when you have a top ranked team, like we're number 4 in the nation right now, a lot of times when you have a top ranked team, I can think about back when Alabama was super dominant under Nick Saban, you would see them going to Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt beat them this year, but you would see them going to Vanderbilt under Nick Saban, and you just knew there was no storyline that could make you say Vanderbilt might actually pull this upset off. I looked at the schedule this week, and I saw that Ohio State is playing Purdue. Like, that's another game. You look at that, there's no storyline that could potentially lead you to think that Purdue might win that game. But when I look at our Hurricanes and I go all the way back to South Florida game, there was some type of storyline in those games that made me go, we might be on upset alert since the South Florida game. Okay, South Florida is a new in-state rivalry. I guess they want to call it a rivalry. They're a newer football school, so obviously they're in the state of Florida. So that was one game where I was like, are these fools gonna come out and just be playing on Heisman mode all of a sudden and doing things outside of character and figure out a way to beat us? It was early in the season. We really hadn't played much. We beat the brakes off of Florida. We beat Ball State, so we really didn't have too much competition. And I thought this was the first time that we were going to play a real football team because I didn't have a lot of faith in Florida. I didn't think Florida was any good at all. They've surprised me quite a bit. But South Florida, I thought that might be a surprise, and they had a potential to put us on upset alert just because it was our first time playing a real football team, in my opinion. The next game after that was Virginia Tech. So everybody, if you've watched the Hurricanes, you know Virginia Tech has a history of figuring out a way to beat Miami every now and again. It goes all the way back to Beamer ball, playing that style of football that I hated to see. It actually made me dislike, for a long time, it made me dislike Virginia Tech almost as much as I disliked Florida State, which is crazy to think about now. But there was a rivalry between Virginia Tech and the Hurricanes. That's one. Also, it was a weekday game, if you remember. It was like on a Thursday or a Friday. I forget which weekday it was, but it was a weekday night game. So that also brings some mystique, and some weird things always tend to happen whenever you're playing on a weekday. And then also, like Virginia Tech, they weren't playing the greatest at that time, but they had returned almost every starter from the previous year, every starter on offense and defense except one. And then they had a mobile quarterback that was coming back from the year prior, and he was really talented. He just hadn't put it together yet. So that was one of the reasons why I thought we should have been on upset alert against Virginia Tech. Then we played against Cal. So what was the storyline with Cal? At first, I was thinking, oh yeah, we're going to beat them pretty good. And then I started looking at some things, and I was like, ooh, this game was like 3,000 miles away. We're going from way down here in Florida all the way up here to California, all the way across the map. So I'm like, that could be a problem, going 3,000 miles across the nation. And then college game day pops up. And I was like, are you serious? So that brought even more attention to the Hurricanes, put more pressure on the Hurricanes. But then it gave the Cal fans so much juice. It's crazy. So that was a concern. And then the last thing about the Cal game is the Cal quarterback verbalized that he wanted to play for the Hurricanes and just wasn't recruited. So that made me think he might come out here and just be so focused that he plays the best game of his life. Obviously, that didn't happen, thankfully, but those were the reasons why I was concerned about playing Cal. The next game, Louisville. I thought we were on upset alert then, too. Louisville is a really good team, for one. They are a really good team. I don't care what their record says. We saw last year how good they were, and then they transferred that into this year. But then outside of just being a good team, they also have a coach, Brom, who's known for upsets. If you just go and look at his history against top ranked teams, like in the top 10, he has a really good history of beating those teams somehow. I don't know what he does, I don't know what kind of magic he comes up with, but somehow he knows how to get his teams amped up to play those games. The next game was Florida State. Okay, so obviously it's a rivalry. Okay, so I don't even think we really need to say much more about that. It's a rivalry game. Florida State's team sucks. But for whatever reason, in sports, when rivalries play each other, they always seem to meet each other on their on their level of skill. I don't know how that is or why that is, but the team that's performing poorly all year, they seem to rise up a little bit, and the team that's playing really well, the pressure gets to them, and they seem to dip down, and they end up being almost the same team somehow whenever they meet. This year, that wasn't the case, thankfully. Hurricanes ended up beating them. And then we'll go to the Duke game. But keep in mind, this is 5 games so far in a row where my mind was telling me that our Hurricanes should be on upset alert. There was no break in this where we had like a Ball State in the middle of all these games where you're like, oh yeah, that's just about a guaranteed victory, right? So then we go and talk about Duke. The storyline on that one that made me think that maybe it was a upset alert was the fact that our former head coach Manny Diaz was coming back to town. I mean, he was saying all the right things, but I knew he wasn't telling his players all those right things. He was telling his Duke players how much it would mean to him to beat the Hurricanes. I know he was, because it would mean a lot to beat your former team. So I understand that. And then also it was a good team with bad losses. They had some losses on the record, but they were a good team, and they had some real close losses that just didn't go their way. And then the last thing is that they have an excellent defense. Doesn't matter where Manny Diaz is, he will put excellent defense on the field. Then we have Georgia Tech. We shouldn't even say much about this one. We know what happened last year. I was sitting in my room watching the game on my bed next to my wife, thinking the game was over, and I'm looking at it like, what is happening? Is that a fumble? Wait, they got the ball? Okay, they're going to throw some crazy pass. He caught it? Oh, he pump faked? He's wide open, touched it? Like, it was crazy. I couldn't believe it. So, we know what happened last year. We do not want to repeat that loss. This is the one game outside of Florida State that I was just dying to get to this year because I want revenge on them so bad. And what I'm really praying for is at the end of the game, we're winning by so many points. We get the ball on like the 2-yard line, and instead of running the ball in the end zone, we kneel the ball and end the game that way. That would be poetic justice. I would love to see that. The next game is Wake Forest. This is the one game where there really isn't any type of storyline to it other than the fact that they're trying to break a 7-game losing streak against the Hurricanes. That gives them some juice, but Wake Forest has really been struggling this year. The next game would be Syracuse. They've got a really good passing offense. It really depends on which Kyle McCord is going to show up, but I've seen them play multiple times this year, and every time I've seen them play, they've looked really impressive. So Syracuse, I think the Hurricanes should be on upset alert for that game, and then we are playing them in Syracuse. So with that passing offense they got, combined with our struggles in the passing defense, I'm concerned about that. And then we talk about the ACC championship. For one, we've never won one. That's the big storyline, right? But then when you add on some other things, it makes you go, whoa. And that thing is, it looks like we're probably going to end up playing SMU. What's so good about what's the crazy storyline behind SMU? Well, obviously it's our former offensive coordinator, who's head coach of that team now, Rhett Lashley. And then it would basically be Miami first string versus Miami third string. Like, they've got so many players from the Hurricanes. It's crazy. Like, so many former Hurricanes. They got Brashard Smith, who's playing lights out over there. So I'm looking forward to that matchup if it does happen. Obviously, there's a lot of football left to be played, so we don't know what that matchup is gonna look like. But it's crazy. It's crazy to think that we'd be playing against SMU of all the teams. It's crazy to think we'd be playing against them. So do I think that we will go undefeated? We still have Georgia Tech left, Wake Forest, and Syracuse in the regular season, and then we finish the season off as in the ACC championship, most likely against SMU. I do believe that we'll end up finishing the year, the regular season undefeated. I think we'll beat Georgia Tech by a lot. I think we'll beat Wake Forest by a lot. I think Syracuse is going to be a shootout that's going to end up being a close game that we'll end up winning in the fourth quarter. Um, and then I do believe we'll finish the regular season undefeated. The ACC championship, I think that one is going to be really tough. I think it's going to have I think the players, if we do play SMU, I think the players will go in there with a mindset similar to a rivalry game where we reduce our level a little bit and they raise their level a little bit, mainly because SMU has so many players that used to play for the Hurricanes who want to prove the Hurricanes were wrong for allowing them to leave. So they're going to be jacked up on that game, super jacked up on that game. So I think that's going to be a close game, but I do think we'll end up winning that one. So I think we're going to go undefeated regular season and finally win an ACC championship this year. That's my thoughts on it. If I were to give like a confidence level, meaning from like 0, I know we're not going to 100% saying I know for a fact, I promise you it's going to happen, I would say I'm about 82 or 83% sure on that. Just based on what I've seen from the Hurricanes this year, especially on the offensive side. And I'm believing that Coach G is going to figure out a way to simplify this defense all game, not get cute, and I think we can get some things turned around. All right, so let me know your thoughts on that. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate the support. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I truly appreciate that. So take care. God bless. Peace.